NWK, the green TR8 that you developed the suspension on. How did that happen, and why did you do what you did?
Right. To my to my memory, um, the uh, special tuning, if you like, had been asked to develop an engine,
Right?
with the objective of it being the production spec for the American, well, for the TR8 launch. This is all before the TR8 launch. Um, and Canley had done Canley?
Can I just ask you a question
Yeah.
on that one,
Yeah.
Richard? So the TR8 launch in the UK or in America? Because
I don't know. I'm not a
well, no,
marketing.
no, no. I'm just going to tell you anyway. I'll fill in the details because this bit I do know. The ACN TR8s, which are the first ones, were hard tops.
Yeah.
They were 77, 78 essentially cars.
Yeah.
So they'd already launched in the States a long
Right.
time before the right and drive ones.
Right.
So when Gary Owen brought that green one down to BL Motorsport, he's he told me a number of different flavors of the story at differing points. But the bottom line seemed to be that if they left it with BL Engineering to make the car better for the right and drive launch, it wouldn't happen. And sending it to you guys was a shortcut. So they made sure that BL Engineering didn't know it was going to you and shipped it down.
Okay. Right.
So I don't know how that fits with what you know.
Well, what I was told was that special tuning had been asked to develop an engine, and that the factory were doing an engine, and these two engines were going to be part of the round tour, the Round Britain tour thing that they
Yep.
did with the club. And then out of that, they would decide which engine was going to best suited. And the reason it wasn't supposed to be a sort of like a racing engine. It was supposed to be what best suited, a whole driving around the countryside and sporty engine. Um, and I don't know whether it was Davenport's idea or Owen's idea, or I have a feeling that there's another director, Fox,
Yeah, Brian Fox.
Brian Fox. Somehow he was in the loop, as far as I know. Um, but anyway, I was asked to, tickle the suspension or tickle the handling, so it was a bit better because even the people, everybody seemed to think that the road car spec it wasn't very sporty.
Right.
But
Did you not tell me about they brought a standard TR8 for you to
yeah,
try through?
after so the green one, um, then I used that as my road car for a period of time. And so I would sort of scrounge different things. I can't remember whether I managed to get Bill Stein. I might have managed to get Bill Stein to do me some dampers. The way if you wanted to get some dampers done, before the next weekend, then you flew to Düsseldorf and their driver drove you to the factory and they do the dampers for you and you take them home again.
All right.
Um, little funny story around that. While I think of it, is that um, they, I think, for was one of the times they gave me some special grease, um, which I think, as far as I remember, is called Fett or Fete in German, in a pot, and they didn't have a lid for it. They put it in this pot, so they put some sort of like cling film over the top and some tape round. And um, when I got to the airport, they wanted to see all because I had dampers and everything. I said, "What's this? This suspicious looking pot with with a bit of plastic on the top." And I said, "It's greased, fat." Yeah, and they looked at me like, "Yeah." So they took the top off guy put his finger in it and fet. It was because it was special grease. Um, they were great actually, the damper, because Davenport was great friends with, was it Hugo? I can't remember his name now. The the boss of,
Right.
of Bill Stein. Um, so anyway, I scrounged and did various bits and pieces, but mainly spring stampers and the standard thing. I just put an extra plate under the front roll bar to give it a bit of anti-dive, um, and fiddled about with the bump stops and did the raising the links in the rear suspension. That was that was a massive improvement. Um, on a road car, it was like having a limited slip diff because you're getting the load in the tires very quickly, so it stops them spinning so early. If you sort of going around a gravelly junction or something and trying to accelerate out of the junction, it made a big difference, and it changes
It,
the whole
the,
thing.
yeah, the car, if you accelerate hard from a junction, it rarely actually wheel spins. You have to try very hard to do that.
Yeah, but you take one without doing that. Um, it's all a combination of what I've learned through rather a lot of years of playing, sort of working on different things and learning how things work, is that everything affects everything else. So if you just do that on its own, that was quite a big change. That was a massive change. But then you want to match the springs and the dampers and the bump steer and everything else around around that. I think the important thing is when there's an issue with some part of the handling, is that you find out what it is that's not worked, what the cause is, because usually you can overcome something by shortening, like, so you've got too much bump steer like they had on some early Porsches. The thing was to limit the suspension travel so it didn't bump steer as much because it didn't move as much. If you try and cure something by roll bars or dampers that isn't caused by that, then you get yourself in another fix because you can overcome that issue, but you cause another issue. You see what I mean?
Oh
You
yeah, no,
you
no.
got you
I,
got to drill down to why what's causing the thing.
the only paperwork that survives from that is that memo that you wrote December
Yeah,
16th or something, 1980.
yeah.
And in that, you'd moved those trailing arms down
Up,
or up
up
rather,
in the body, up in the body.
but you hadn't moved the other end. But on the actual car later, now that I've got it, it has been moved, and the other point has moved as well.
Well, the the point on the body was moved up by an inch.
Right. Well, the other point moved as well. But it can't have been moved when you wrote the memo because you don't mention it.
Well,
It's moved on the car. So that must be something you did later at some point.
or somebody else did.
Well, there's always that, yeah.
Um, Lowering it on the axle was a live axle. I'm not sure that makes any difference. It's where it is on the body relative to the center of the wheel. Maybe, maybe it does. I can't remember. I
No, it's
don't
all right.
remember. I'm there'll be a multitude of things that I tried. They weren't all necessarily documented.
I've not saying they aren't. I just thought, well,
Yeah.
well, I've got you recording. I may never get you again. So I'll ask you the question now, even if you can't remember it. I mean, At
Yeah.
the end of the day, the car is what it is. When it went on the round Britain, it had a normal spoiler fitted to it, a production one. In your memo, you fitted the Mark II rally spoiler to it, and it still has that spoiler on it now. And I can tell it's a works one because if you look underneath, it's painted red behind.
Uh,
So you can see it was just taken out of a stockpile off a shelf somewhere.
probably. One thing that I have actually come across is because I couldn't remember whether we'd taken it in the wind tunnel. I've got all the wind tunnel data, all the wind tunnel results,
You have found them for it.
and that was with us. So we tried it without the spoiler,
Yeah.
with the standard spoiler, a standard spoiler plus a lip, and I can't. I think that was probably just a little bit sticking out the front. I can't recollect what that meant, and the ST spoiler, which somebody had developed in the past. And the other thing which made a difference was the number, taking the number plate on and off.
Positive or negative?
Um, like most things, you get something and you get something else. I think the cooling was improved. I think because we had pressure sensors around all four corners of the radiator and one in the middle, and the one in the middle got more air without the radiator, without the number plate on it.
Right. Okay. Unfortunately, I'm not
Um,
going to get away with that one.
well, no, this is in the wind tunnel.
Yes, I know. I was just thinking.
You've
Actually, no,
got
no, I
that
could.
car in the wind tunnel without a number plate.
Well, no, actually, I've just realised I could get a transfer one and just stick it on the nose panel.
As long as it meets the registration, I mean, yeah, it doesn't have to
Yeah.
be read. I've always I teach my I'm teaching postgraduate students vehicle dynamics at the minute
Right.
a
That's
bit. Well,
Oxford,
I'm
is it?
helping do that at Oxford Brookes,
Yeah.
um, and one of the key things I give one of my lectures is like from the from the spark of an idea through to the car being on the track, all the processes, and the really important one is you read the rules
Right.
and you read them again and you read them upside down, inside out, and you find out what explicitly you can't do because they'll be looking for that. But you've got to the competition starts when the rules come out, and you have to work out what you can do within the rules, but you can be creative about what you do. That it just says if it doesn't say you can't do something,
You can do it.
then yeah, you have to read all the rules and the sporting regulations and everything else and understand it. And so, like a number plate would be, probably if you were in Europe at that time, you probably if it fell off, they probably wouldn't be bothered anyway.
Well, the USA spec cars in some states they don't need a front number plate.
Yeah, crazy, isn't it?
Anyway, that aside, but that's what you can remember of that. Because when I spoke to Davenport, I asked him about what Cliff Humphreys was told to do to the engine. And I think more or less his words went along the lines of, we gave it to Cliff and said, do whatever you like. And that was it. And I said, so you don't know what was done? He said, no, no idea.
Yeah. Well, Cliff, that was the best thing he could have done to get a good engine.
Give it to
Because
Cliff
apparently everybody liked the engine because Cliff was not an academic. He didn't do, you know, he knew how to make engines work. He'd been doing it for years and years and years. And the example that I'll give you of how good he was is that and this is a 6R4
Yeah.
example. Um, the 6R4 engine had various issues, one of which was a big hole in the torque curve around about 4,000 revs, which is not good for a naturally aspirated
Yeah.
car, because the whole point of it was of having a naturally aspirated one was that it had lovely torque curve. It had various reliability issues as well. So Cliff said, what you need to do is you need to change the exhaust. There were some things to do with the cam belt. Um, you need to change the exhaust, this aspect of the exhaust system, and you need to change the cam to this particular Cosworth cam. It didn't happen.
Right.
We could get It could get 400 horsepower, but it wasn't reliable. So we went to Thousand Lakes or somewhere. Yeah, that went to Thousand Lakes. We went with about 390 horsepower, which was occasionally reliable.
Right.
If you tried to get more than it was just even more unreliable. Um, the Peugeot 205 with the little turbo, was like 500 horsepower. So it could keep up around the corners, but in a straight line.
It left you.
Um, when motorsport was disbanded, Cliff, where he had a little dyno. By that time, we were in Cowley, not Abingdon, because the MG plant had stopped.
Yeah.
Um, Cliff managed to do a deal with Unipart that he would run their Gold Seal engines on the dyno for free anytime they wanted, if he could keep the dyno and use it as he would. So the first thing he did with the 6R4 engine was to put the cam in that he said we should always have and change the exhaust in the way he always did. And immediately he was getting 440 horsepower with no hole in the torque curve. Um, and it was really reliable.
Right.
Yeah, he just understood what engines needed. It didn't have a slide rule to work out this thing. And of course, then he went on to get a turbo from Williams, and developed 700 horsepower something for Will Gollop's rallycross car, and it was reliable, reasonably. So yeah, that was the right answer to give to Cliff because he just knew. Yeah,
Well, that's I try to push him on what did he do. I've pushed you before on what did he do with the engine, and you don't know, and
I,
he doesn't know, and I
I
don't
hadn't. No,
know. But it drives like definitely like no other but road going TRA I've ever driven before.
yeah. Well,
Both
but
from
it's
its
quite.
power and its handling.
But it's if I remember, because I drove it quite a lot.
Yeah.
Um, and it always seemed to be a really nice thing to drive on the road. Went like went as quick as you wanted it to, but it was sort of kind and you didn't have to
Well, I think
crash it.
that was the premise on the WL9 camshaft in that unlike a Kent cam or something like that where it's ropey around town, it should be drivable around town, and then once you get the revs up, it becomes a different beast, and that is how it drives today.
Yeah, yeah,
Once you get up to 3,000 revs, it flies. But then you've driven it, so you would know that.
yeah. But you don't need to use all the revs. I'm a low rev person.
Well, the other thing I found with it is it will accelerate in fifth gear on the
Yeah,
motorway, actually quite hard.
yeah.
No TR8 I've ever owned would accelerate
Well,
in fifth gear like that.
after the Manx, one of the Manx rallies where Tony won, um, the come across on the ferry to Heysham, if I remember. Um, and so they said to me, because I'd gone by a different mode of transport. Uh, I, I said, "Can you drive this back to Abingdon?" Right. So I drove the car as it just won the rally back to Abingdon, and I found exactly the same thing. Why do I need to try and start off in first gear? Because I can start in fifth, and it just goes and then we're away. It exactly the same thing because it's got loads of torque,
Hmm.
even with the rally engine. Um,
No, it's a shame we never made any right-hand drive ones of any number. But anyway,
yeah.
uh,
Well, you can tell me if this is true because I this is what
go
I understand. The reason why um, it wasn't as pretty and as successful as it was going to be because it was always intended to be an open car. This is what I was told. The Americans regulation people said, okay, you've got to have this rollover test where you put a load, it's a bit like a racing car safety cage thing. You have to put a load, a vertical load, a side load, and a back load or something simultaneously on the top of the structure,
roof. Yeah.
on the top of the screen area, um, to be safe in. And the only way they couldn't see how to do that in Triumph, apparently, they couldn't achieve that. So they thought, well, the only way we can sell it in America is to make it hardtop because we can make it conform to these regulations then.
You know which company did achieve that, don't you?
No.
Mercedes. The Mercedes SL has a hard top roof to it and it is unbelievably heavy. The wife always wanted one, so we bought one recently. And it's a two-man job to get the roof off. It's that heavy.
Okay. But
And the hood is tucked down. So for a safety point of view, you could roll it, and that's how Mercedes got round it. They
okay.
built a solid roof.
They built a solid roof, but they could take it off.
Yes, that
Uh,
was the point.
so what I understood was that they designed it then as a hardtop
Yes.
or redesigned it as a hardtop that could pass the test. Then and maybe that's why some cars had a T-bar. Um, but then the American companies said, we can't achieve this. So they just so they persuaded the authorities that they couldn't, it wasn't achievable. And by that time, it was too late. They were nearly in production with the with the tin top TR, so they had to carry on. But I believe it was always intended because it was they wanted to sell it in America.
There was my understanding of it is originally they were thinking about a convertible. Then America came in, so they shoved the convertible idea to one side and said, "Okay, we will have to go with a coupe,"
Yeah,
which is what they then did. But at some point, um, I always meant to speak to Harris Mann about this, but unfortunately, he's moved on over the rainbow now, so I can't. But I he did say something once talking to somebody else where I was stood there at the time, and I was led to believe that he had always intended that it would be that way eventually. It was just the Americans that stopped it. But at the end, the production TR8, let's just say in round figures, there were about 300 of them, give or take 50 probably. And they were the early ones, but they were built to homologate the V8 for the works car. 79, the TR8, there were a few tin top TR8s that trickled into 79, but not many. And then thereafter, it was only convertibles because the Yanks only wanted to buy a convertible, so
exactly.
they didn't pick up any tin tops.
Yeah.
Was how it worked out, but I don't think we'll ever really know
Yeah,
who
well,
said what?
I think the just this is just my impression that the reason that the car never really took off is because it was lots of people thought it was ugly. It wasn't a pretty car, which the soft top is much more.
I'd
And
have to, yeah, I'd have to say I've never been a fan of the hard top. It has never really appealed to me. But
yeah, well,
same time, as
exactly.
soon as I
But
saw
it,
the soft top, I
but
was fine.
yeah, but exactly. So they wouldn't have sold very many. So that would have like if you're in if you're the government of Triumph and you're looking and say, well, we've invested all this money in making these cars, and they they people think they're not very pretty, and not many people are buying them. So that I'm sure that helped kill the program.
The story I've always known it to be is the fact that the TR7 and TR8 were being sold in America at a loss. The TR8 had rave reviews at the time from various motoring press. Didn't they call it the English Corvette or something like that at one point? And I think Road and Track said it was the best new car of 1980 even. So it wasn't that the interest wasn't there, it was. But by that point, BL
Yeah,
was in such a mess.
yeah,
To have continued making the TR8 without the TR7 wasn't cost effective because they were made on the same line. So
yeah,
we just ran out of money basically.
yeah.
Uh, which
No, but if they if I rather hope, you know, if they hadn't done a tin top, I
yeah,
think it would have been more successful.
yeah, well, I would think so, but I've got a lot of people that I know who love the tin tops, so they might disagree. But I don't know. In fact, I'm sure some of
Yeah.
them. I don't know. I think it's. I like the Mercedes solution. The Mercedes solution works for me. Take the roof off,
Yes.
even if it does weigh a ton. I mean, the Mercedes in comparison is 1,900 kilos.
Yeah.
TRA is 1,400 kilos. That's a big difference.
Yeah. You could take your Mercedes, um, and you can drive it through potholes, and it shouldn't make any difference to your Mercedes because it's the I we did a strip down of an S class Mercedes
Yeah.
a long time ago, and the it's really properly engineered. Even the Sprinter, the Mercedes Sprinter, is engineered in a different league than a
I,
Ford
I,
Transit.
we've got Alice. She'd always wanted an SL of the wife for years and years. Somebody opposite had one, and she'd set a heart on one. So we went up to Matthewson's, better known as Bangers and Cash,
Yeah,
a while ago, and I was looking for a Toyota Supra for my son because he'd always wanted one, and there was one in there, the auction. That I thought I might do up and sort it out with him. But when I looked at it, it was terrible. So I dropped that. And anyway, Alison saw this Merc and it'd come out of a private collection. And she said, "Oh, I've always wanted one of those." I said, "Why have we only just mentioned it now?" And she said, "Well, I've only just seen it now." I said, "So does that mean you want to bid on it?" Anyway, so we did. I mean, Matthewson's always saying people come here for one car and go with another. Anyway, that's exactly what we did.
yeah,
We went with another one, but I, because it's only done sort of 100 miles a year as this car for the last 20 odd years. So it's only just come out of the garage, having been serviced and the brakes recommissioned and whatever, various other things that have just gone from it being sat. But I drove it home, and that has got to be one of the smoothest cars I think I've ever driven. I've never driven one before till then, and this is a 1984 SL,
yeah,
and it was just the speed bumps in the village. If I hit it with one of the TRs, it's bang, rattle, and roll on every single one. The Merc, well, we've got a Land Rover Discovery with an air suspension, and that feels the bumps, but only just. The Merc, you don't feel them at all. Nothing. You might, maybe a pebble you just ran over. So amazing car. Anyway, right. I think I've probably ground as much as you can remember out of
At,
you.
at the moment, yeah, when I've because I'm trying to squeeze my 20-foot container into a 1960s size garage.
Well,
So
I
I'm
think
having
that's
to
very
chuck
commendable
out
of you.
so much stuff. It's not true. So I'm gradually going through paperwork, and I know I've got notebooks with various things in somewhere.